The wind on the Wyoming high plains did not drift or wander. It hunted. It scraped the earth down to bone and drove grit into skin, eyes and breath chasing anything foolish enough to stand against it. Out there, the land did not care who you were or what you deserved. It only decided whether you would endure or be erased. Mara walked into that wind with her head bowed and her body pitched forward, moving like someone locked in combat with a living thing that wanted her dead. She no longer knew how many days she had been walking. 3, maybe 4. Time collapsed when your feet were torn open and the cold sliced like knives through wool and flesh. Her boots were finished, the thin soles split wide, enough that she felt every stone and frozen rut bite into her bones. Her left heel burned raw where a blister had burst, her sock stiff with dried blood, the fabric rubbing against skin that screamed with every step. In her arms, she clutched a small bundle of clothes wrapped in a rough shawl that smelled of lye soap and old tobacco, the last fragments of a life already burned away. It was everything she owned now, everything she had carried from the place she had fled without looking back. To the west, mountains rose sharp and crooked like broken teeth, their peaks already dusted white, promising a winter that killed the unprepared without hesitation. Above her, the sky sagged low and bruised purple, heavy with snow and shadow, offering no warmth, no mercy, only the truth. She knew it in her bones then, with a certainty that hollowed her chest. She would not survive another night out there. Her knees struck the frozen ground when she stumbled, pain flashing bright and hot. A cry climbed her throat, but she crushed it down. Crying wasted warmth. Crying wasted water. Crying never saved anyone. She forced herself upright again, hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped her bundle. "You cannot stop," she told herself, the words scraping raw inside her mind. "If you stop, the cold takes you." Silver Creek lay somewhere behind her, but the memory burned like fresh skin under salt. A town where men lost their money and women lost their choices, where hope came cheap and left expensive scars. She had rented a room in a boarding house that pretended not to notice. How a woman paid her way until a new proprietor arrived. A righteous woman clutching a Bible in one hand and a ledger in the other, who decided Mara was bad for business, respectable. The word still tasted bitter. Respectability was something Mara had stopped owning at 16, and no one had ever let her forget it. As the afternoon thinned into a watery gray dusk, she saw it through the wind-blown haze, a thin ribbon of smoke twisting upward, faint and frayed, nearly torn apart by the gale. It was barely there, but it was real. Where there was smoke, there was fire, and where there was fire, there was shelter. Hope, fragile as it was, took the shape of that wavering line. She pushed her legs harder, stumbling forward until the shape of a cabin emerged from the gloom. Rough-hewn logs weathered to iron gray, fitted together by hands that valued survival over beauty. A small corral stood nearby with 2 horses turned into the wind. Heads low, tails stiff. No other buildings, no neighbors, no one to hear her scream if she chose wrong. But it was not the open plains, and that was enough. She reached the door. There was no porch, only a single stone dragged into place as a step. She stopped, her hand hovering inches from the rough wood. She knew what men saw when a woman arrived alone on foot. No horse, no trunk, shoes destroyed, eyes hollow with need. Broken, desperate, easy. The cold had settled deep into her bones now, a weight she could not shake. She knocked. The sound vanished into the storm. She waited, teeth chattering so violently her jaw ached. She knocked again, harder this time. "Please," she whispered against the door, the word a breath more than a sound. A latch clicked. The door opened slowly, pulled inward. A tall man filled the frame, blocking the warm orange glow of firelight behind him. He wore a heavy wool coat and a battered hat pulled low, shadowing his eyes. In his right hand was a Winchester rifle, held easy but ready, the kind of grip that spoke of long familiarity. He did not speak. He only looked. His face was carved by hard miles. Somewhere in his mid-30s, wind and sun cutting deep lines around his eyes and mouth, a pale scar running from his temple down into his beard. His eyes were dark and unreadable. Mara tried to speak, but her throat was too dry to form words. The warmth spilling from inside hit her all at once, making the world tilt. Her knees weakened. "Help me," she rasped finally. The man did not move at first. His gaze slid past her, sweeping the empty horizon, searching for shadows, for shapes that did not belong. A husband, a pimp, a posse. Finding nothing but the barren plains, he looked back at her, at the ruined shoes, the trembling hands, the blue tinge to her lips. Something shifted in his expression. Not pity, maybe irritation, maybe resignation. He stepped back a fraction and lowered the rifle. "Come in before you let all the heat out," he said, his voice rough like gravel under a wagon wheel. Mara stumbled inside, her legs giving way. She pitched forward, and while he did not catch her, his hand clamped around her arm, steadying her against the doorframe. "Sit," he ordered, nodding toward a small table near the stove. The cabin was a single room, clean and spare, everything arranged with purpose. A cast-iron stove glowed in the corner. A narrow bed hugged the far wall. Saddles hung from pegs, gear neatly stored. Warmth wrapped around her like something unreal. He pressed a tin cup of cold water into her hands. She drank greedily, choking as she swallowed. He ladled stew into a chipped bowl and set it in front of her. "Eat slow," he said. She tried, but hunger tore through restraint, and the food was gone before she realized it. When she finished, he finally spoke again. "Where'd you come from?" "Silver Creek, that's 3 days on foot." "Maybe 4. She stared at her scraped, bleeding knuckles. "I had nowhere else." He watched her closely, reading her the way a man read tracks in dirt, the fading bruises on her wrists, the way she flinched when his boots shifted, the way she kept her eyes lowered. "You're running from something," he said. She did not answer. He sighed, a quiet sound. "Name's Eli Turner." "Mara," she said. He crossed his arms. "You can sleep here tonight, but come morning, you head for the stage road. I'll point you the way." Her stomach dropped. The stage road was 2 days on foot. She would not make it. She needed warmth, food, a roof. She had nothing to offer except what men always took. She stood, legs trembling. "Mr. Turner," she whispered. He looked up. "I'm not worth much, but I'll do anything for a roof over my head." The cabin went still. Even the wind seemed to pause. Eli's jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists. For a moment, she thought he might throw her back into the storm. Instead, his voice came low and sharp. "No, not here." The look in his eyes held no desire. It was anger, not at her, but at a world that had taught her that lie. Outside, the storm deepened. Wind shoved at the cabin walls, snow hissing along the window frame. Mara sat near the stove, arms wrapped around herself, watching firelight pulse against iron. Eli moved about with quiet efficiency, hanging his coat, checking the horses through the side window, stacking damp wood. He did not look at her much, and somehow that hurt more than staring ever had. Most men measured her value with their eyes. Eli Turner had looked once and turned away as if the sight troubled him. She did not know how to understand that. "You can take the bed," he said at last. "I'll sleep in the chair. I'll take the floor. Not in this cold. Take the bed." She hesitated, then touched the edge of the mattress. It was firm and clean, smelling faintly of cedar. Nothing like the stale cigars and cheap perfume of silver. Creak. She sat carefully, unsure she deserved it. Eli dropped into the wooden chair by the door, one boot hooked on the rung, a man settling into a familiar vigil. His rifle leaned within reach. "You don't have to stay awake," she said softly. "I do." "Why?" "Because someone knocked on my door in the middle of a storm and told me she was willing to give up her dignity just to stay alive." His voice stayed calm. "So I'm keeping watch for both of us." Shame burned her cheeks. "I didn't know what else to offer." "You shouldn't have to offer anything," he said. "Shelter is shelter. A person gives it or they don't." She lay back, exhaustion dragging her under. Her last thought before sleep was that she should not have survived this long. And maybe she had only lived because she found this cabin and not another. Hours later, the sound of horses tore her awake. More than one. Fast. Eli was already at the window, posture changed, coiled tight. "What is it? Riders. 3 of them." Cold spread through her chest. "They found me." "Who?" "Wade Carter. He runs the biggest gambling hall. When I tried to leave, he sent men. Said I was property until my debt was paid." Eli's eyes darkened. "Are those his men?" She nodded. He moved for the rifle. "They won't take you. You don't know what he'll do." "I don't care. I'm not handing you over." Boots crunched outside. "Turner, open up." He stood between her and the door. Go behind the bed. Stay low. The men laughed. We know she's there. She ain't worth dying over. The door shuddered under a kick. You kick it again, Eli warned, and you're not walking back. A gunshot shattered the night. Eli fired back, clean and steady. Chaos erupted. He told her she was safe no matter what happened. Gunfire roared. Glass shattered. Cold poured in. He dragged her behind the stove. They're not getting you, he said. Silence fell. Then a smooth voice cut through the dark. Ellie Turner, you have something that belongs to me. Send her out or I burn you out. You're not getting her. Wade laughed. You think you can protect her? I can and I will. He gave her his revolver. If anyone gets past me, shoot. Outside men moved. One fell, another ran. Wood cracked behind them. A man burst through the back door. Eli tackled him, ended it fast. We end this now, he said. They stepped outside. Wade reached for his gun. Eli fired first. Silence followed. Pick him up, Eli said. Tell them she was never property. The men fled. Snow fell soft. Why, she asked. Because I won't let the world teach you that lie again. Hope settled in her chest. What now? Now you stay until you're strong and we figure it out together. For the first time, she felt safe, and she wasn't running anymore. Morning came slow and pale. The snow that had fallen overnight lay crisp and white, glittering faintly under the weak winter sun. Mara sat near the stove. Wrapped in blankets Eli had draped around her the night before. She was quiet, still shaking from more than just the cold. Her eyes tracing the iron stove's glow as if memorizing warmth itself. Eli moved around the cabin, tending to chores as if the storm outside was a distant memory. The horses needed feed, the fire needed tending, and the cabin demanded order to survive the coming days. He worked with efficiency, every movement precise, measured and purposeful, like a man who had learned that chaos in the plains was inevitable but manageable with focus and discipline. Mara watched him, silently noting how he treated everything with respect. Everything but himself. She shivered, though the fire's heat was strong. Her body was stiff from the long walk, her muscles raw, and her mind still reeling from the previous night's terror. The blood on her hands had dried into stubborn crusts, and every joint ached like it had been pulled too tight. She reached down, tugging off her ruined boots, and gingerly massaged her feet, wincing at every tender spot. It was a reminder that her body had carried her farther than her spirit believed possible. She had survived, somehow. Eli's voice broke the quiet. Breakfast is hot. Eat slow. She rose, unsteady on her legs, and made her way to the small table. Steam rose from a bowl of thick porridge, salted and spiced with a little meat he had roasted over the fire. She ate carefully this time, aware of the man watching her from the corner of his eye, noting each bite, each swallow, yet offering no judgment. After a few moments of silence, she spoke, her voice husky. How far is the stage road? 2 days, if you keep the pace steady and don't stop for anything. And it's not easy. Horses or not, the trail cuts through ridges, frozen streams, and open stretches where the wind will shred a person alive if they hesitate. Mara nodded, her mind already calculating. 2 days. She needed to survive 2 more days on foot. That was the reality of her situation. Eli moved toward the window, peering through a narrow crack at the horizon. Mara followed his gaze and caught the faint line of smoke curling upward from a distant ridge. A lone cabin far beyond the plains. A place for travelers, maybe. The wind had shifted overnight, lighter, but still carrying sharp cold that promised the plains would not forgive laziness. Eli turned back to her, expression unreadable. We'll wait a few hours. Let the sun rise a little more. The trail is treacherous, and I don't want you hurt before you even leave. She met his eyes, searching for hesitation, for a sign that he would insist she stay. There was none. His jaw was set, eyes calm, unwavering. Mara swallowed hard. She wanted to argue, to insist that she could handle the trail herself. But the exhaustion running through her veins and the memory of last night's storm told her otherwise. She would wait. They spent the morning in silence, the cabin warm, the wind outside whispering promises of hardship that had yet to come. Eli checked the horses again, brushing snow from their coats, inspecting the saddles, ensuring that every detail was accounted for. Mara helped where she could, fetching water, stoking the fire, moving slowly, painfully aware of how fragile her body had become. By late morning, The sun had climbed enough to cast long shadows across the snow-covered plains. Eli prepared a small bundle for Mara, tying her clothes, a little dried meat, and some water into a worn satchel. He handed it to her with careful hands. She took it, her fingers trembling slightly. "You'll need to be careful," he said. "There's no help out there. Every shadow could hide danger. Every ridge could leave you exposed." Mara nodded, her heart thumping in her chest. "I can do it." She almost said more, almost promised that she would survive. But the words felt hollow, and Eli didn't press. He trusted her to know her limits. Outside, the cold hit. Immediately, sharp and unforgiving. Snow crunched under their boots as they walked to the corral. Eli's hands worked quickly, securing saddles and checking gear. Mara climbed onto a small rise, looking back at the cabin one last time. The warm glow of the iron stove still pulsed faintly through the open door, a reminder of safety, of a roof over her head. She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the choice she was about to make. Behind them, the mountains loomed, jagged and silent, snow clinging to their peaks like teeth of white iron. The plains stretched beyond, empty, treacherous, and unfeeling. They set off slowly, Eli leading the way, Mara keeping close, the satchel digging into her shoulder. The trail was rough, frozen streams and jagged rocks threatening every step. Her legs protested, her lungs burned with the effort of walking through heavy snow, and each breath was a sharp slice of cold. Yet Eli moved steadily, a constant presence, a guide whose confidence never faltered. They pressed on, the wind rising again, carrying fine powdery snow that stung exposed skin. Mara's fingers were numb, her nose red and raw, and yet she moved, step by agonizing step, driven by the memory of the warmth she had known just hours before. Mid-afternoon brought a small respite. They found a shallow ravine sheltered from the wind enough to rest. Eli built a small fire from the scattered driftwood he had packed along, and they crouched near it, warmth slowly seeping into her frozen limbs. Mara sipped water from a flask he offered, shivering but grateful. Her mind drifted to the night before, to the chaos of gunfire and survival, and she realized something profound. For the first time in years, she had survived not just by luck, but because someone had chosen to protect her, not for gain, not for selfish reason, but because she was worth it. Eli studied her in the firelight, his eyes flicking from her face to the trail ahead. "We need to move soon. The stage road isn't far, but daylight fades quickly out here." Mara nodded, swallowing hard, pushing herself up, feeling the stiffness in her joints protest every movement. He handed her the satchel again. "We keep pace, don't stop. Every step counts." She adjusted the strap across her shoulder, feeling the weight of survival, the fragility of life in the high plains. They continued, trudging through the cold, the snow and wind demanding every ounce of their strength. Mara's mind replayed the night's events, the shouting, the bullets, the weight of fear and relief that had come together like a living thing. She glanced at Eli, whose movements were smooth, practiced, deliberate, and she realized that he had walked this path countless times. Yet every step carried purpose, intent, and a silent promise that she would not be abandoned. Hours passed. The sun began to sink, painting the snow in shades of bruised purple and gold. Mara's legs ached, her lungs burned with the effort of the cold air, yet she kept moving. The plains stretched endless before her, unforgiving and beautiful in equal measure. Each step carried the echo of last night, the memory of fire, gunfire, and the strange, fragile hope that she could survive. Eli kept a watchful eye on the horizon, the rifle slung across his back, his posture a living wall of protection. Every ridge, every shadow, every turn in the frozen landscape was scanned with precision. Finally, just as the light began to fade entirely, they reached a small ridge overlooking the stage road. Mara could see the worn trail snaking through the hills below, the distant glimmer of another cabin, perhaps a waypoint, perhaps a stranger's roof. Relief mingled with dread in her chest. The journey was far from over, yet the path was visible, tangible, real. Eli crouched beside her, keeping low. "You can do this," he said quietly. Mara nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Yes, I can." They descended slowly, each step careful, calculated. The wind bit again, snow whipped against their faces, but the trail offered a rhythm, a sense of direction, a fragile promise of survival. Mara's fingers gripped the satchel strap tighter. Her knuckles white, but her mind was clear. She had survived a storm, a man, and the merciless plains. She could survive this. As night approached, the trail opened into a small clearing. Mara caught the faint scent of smoke again, a signal that shelter waited. The mountains behind cast long shadows, protective and menacing, framing the scene in quiet grandeur. Eli signaled her to stop. They crouched, waiting, watching. The wind had shifted, carrying no danger, only the promise of warmth ahead. Mara's chest rose and fell in heavy breaths, her heart still hammering from the journey, the fear, the near death she had endured. Yet something deep inside her stirred. She was alive. She had survived. And she was not alone. Night fell fully over the plains, the sky bruised purple fading to ink black, pierced only by faint stars and the silver glow of snow under the moonlight. Mara and Eli crouched at the edge of the clearing, eyes scanning the darkened trail ahead. The smoke from a distant cabin curled softly into the night air, a beacon of warmth and safety, or perhaps the unknown. The wind had eased, but the plains had a way of testing resolve even when still. Mara's muscles screamed in protest with every movement, her body screaming against the cold, against exhaustion, against fear she had tried to bury. Yet she pressed on step by careful step, guided by the quiet steadiness of Eli at her side. The stage road stretched ahead like a beaten ribbon of brown against the stark whiteness of the plains, narrow, uneven, and treacherous. Every step Mara took reminded her that a misstep could leave her stranded, exposed to the wind, the cold, or worse. Yet the rhythm of the journey, the push forward, carried with it a strange, fragile hope. Eli moved silently, eyes sharp, senses tuned to every sound, every shadow, every hint of danger. Mara followed, clutching the satchel, drawing courage from his calm. She had survived storms, gunfire, and exhaustion, and she was learning that perhaps survival was as much about trust as it was about endurance. As they walked, Mara's mind drifted. Memories of Silver Creek pressed against her. The harsh faces, the cold words, the way men had looked at her as though she were an object, a thing to take or trade. Wade Carter's face haunted her. The confidence, the cruelty, the way he treated people like pieces on a board. She shook her head slightly, dispelling the images. Not here, not anymore. Here, the world seemed larger than the cruelty she had endured. The plains were cruel, yes, but they did not demand she bend to someone else's will. Here she had a choice. Hours passed, the wind rising again as it always did, driving fine snow in sharp slants that cut exposed skin. Mara's breath came ragged, her fingers numb despite gloves, her legs protesting with every step. Eli remained beside her, a constant shield, his eyes scanning the horizon, his hand never far from his rifle. They moved with a rhythm born of experience, each footfall deliberate, calculated to minimize risk. Suddenly a noise, a faint crunch. The echo of boots against frozen snow halted them both. Eli froze, his body tense like a bowstring pulled taut. Mara's heart leapt. She could hear the faint whisper of a threat in the wind. "Hide!" Eli mouthed, crouching low. Mara dropped to her knees, gripping the satchel tightly. A shadow moved along the ridge, careful, measured, observing. Mara held her breath. The shadow passed, revealing a lone rider. Distant, anonymous, disappearing again into the folds of the land. They waited in silence until the echo faded completely. Mara exhaled slowly, the tension leaving her body in a shiver. Eli gave a slight nod. No threat, not yet. They pressed on, moving faster now, the fire of urgency behind every step. The stage road opened more fully, revealing a faint cabin tucked against a ridge in the distance. Smoke curled from its chimney, thin, fragile, a promise that warmth and safety waited. Mara felt her legs falter under the weight of relief, exhaustion threatening to claim her completely. Eli's hand steadied her on her elbow, guiding her with a gentle firmness. "Almost there," he whispered. "Almost," she nodded, drawing on the last of her strength. The snow was deeper here, footprints vanishing under the relentless wind, every step a fight. She stumbled once, twice, but Eli's hand was always there to catch her, to steady, to guide. Finally, they reached the small rise overlooking the cabin. Mara allowed herself a brief moment to breathe, to see the glow of firelight spilling into the night. the rough logs warm against the cold world. Relief and fear tangled inside her chest. She had survived, but the journey was not over. Shadows still moved beyond the clearing. Every sound could be danger. Every ridge could conceal enemies. Eli's eyes swept the horizon, calculating, patient, vigilant. Mara mirrored him, senses alert, every instinct alive. They descended toward the cabin with care. The snow resisted every step, refusing to yield easily to tired legs. Mara's breath formed clouds in the frigid air. Her hands shook as she clutched the satchel, each movement a reminder of the fragile life she carried within it. Eli signaled to stop as they neared the front door. Mara looked up at him, reading the tension in his stance, the slight narrowing of his eyes, the subtle shift of his weight. Danger lingered just beyond the reach of sight. They crouched behind a low ridge, waiting, listening, every sound magnified in the cold silence. A door opened. Mara flinched. Shadows moved inside the cabin, but the light revealed only an empty interior, smoke drifting lazily from a small stove. Relief hit her briefly before Eli signaled her to stay low. They moved carefully, silently, approaching the doorway with precision. Mara's heart pounded in her chest like a drum of war. She kept low, shoulder hunched, eyes fixed on Eli. They entered the cabin together. The warmth hit Mara immediately, a suffocating, comforting heat that made her gasp. The room was small, sparse, functional, every item purposeful. A stove glowed faintly in the corner. A small cot sat against the far wall. Shelves held rough-spun blankets and a few supplies. Mara dropped to her knees, exhaustion claiming her, and drew deep, shuddering breaths of warmth. Eli moved around the cabin, checking windows, securing the room, a silent guardian ensuring no danger remained. After a few moments, Eli turned to her. "You're safe for now," he said. Mara nodded, tears prickling her eyes, gratitude overwhelming exhaustion. She had survived the storm, the plains, the men, and now she had survived this. Somehow, against impossible odds, she had made it. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel it, relief, warmth, the fragile beginnings of hope. Mara sat near the stove as the wind rose again outside, rattling the cabin walls. Eli kept his vigil, his rifle near, eyes sharp, silent, an unyielding shield. She understood then that survival was never solitary. It was the sum of vigilance, courage, trust, and the rare kindness of someone who refused to let you fall. Hours passed. The wind outside roared, snow biting at the windows and door. But inside the cabin, life continued. Mara pulled the thin blankets tighter around herself, letting the fire warm her stiff body. Eli moved with quiet efficiency, tending to the horses, checking the stove, ensuring that the space around them remained safe and functional. He did not speak much, his presence enough to anchor her trembling thoughts. Mara's mind replayed the journey, the gunfire, the fear, the decisions made in the shadow of survival. She had walked through storms of snow, storms of bullets, storms of fear, and emerged alive. As dawn approached, the sky faded from ink black to bruised lavender, the wind easing to a soft sigh over the plains. Mara's eyes opened, noticing the faint glow of the horizon. Hope, fragile and stubborn, settled in her chest. The memory of Eli's unwavering stance, of his calm precision, of his refusal to treat her as property or prey, imprinted itself deep. She was alive, and for the first time in years, she felt something approaching safety, something approaching belonging. The morning sun rose slowly over the plains, pale gold spilling across the jagged mountains and frozen fields. Mara lay on the cot, blankets wrapped tight around her, warmth slowly seeping back into her frozen limbs. Her eyes followed the dance of sunlight on the snow, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to believe that she had survived not by luck, but by reaching a place where survival was possible. Eli moved quietly around the cabin, checking on the horses and securing the supplies, every gesture precise, careful, and calm. Mara watched him, feeling a quiet awe at the way he commanded space, moved with purpose, and yet carried no malice. She rose, stiff and slow, pulling on boots that had been dried and repaired as best as the cabin allowed. Her body ached, but each movement reminded her she was alive, that she had endured. The wind outside whispered through the cracks, a reminder of the harsh world beyond the cabin. But here, for now, it could not touch her. Eli handed her a small bundle of food and water. "Eat slow," he said, eyes scanning the horizon even as his voice remained calm. She nodded, gripping the bundle, feeling the weight of sustenance as a gift she had earned through hardship. By midday, the storm that had driven her across the plains was a distant memory. The sun shone weakly, reflecting off the snow in dazzling flashes. Mara felt the heat on her face and, for a moment, allowed herself a smile, shaky and tentative. The plains were still vast, unforgiving. But she had survived the night, and with Eli's guidance, she could navigate the path ahead. They moved outside, checking the horses, adjusting saddles, making sure every detail was in place. The trail ahead was 2 days on foot, treacherous and unyielding but visible, tangible. Mara's legs trembled as she walked, every step a negotiation with exhaustion and cold. Even as they moved, Mara's mind replayed the horrors of Silver Creek, the cruelty of Wade Carter, the suffocating weight of being considered property, the fear and desperation that had driven her to flee. But the memory was tempered now with gratitude and wonder. Eli Turner had chosen to protect her, had refused to accept the lie that she was nothing more than a commodity. That choice, quiet but fierce, had changed everything. She felt it in her chest, a fragile spark of hope that she might belong somewhere, that she might survive and live beyond the terror of her past. The plains stretched before them, unbroken and silent except for the crunch of snow beneath. Their boots and the distant whisper of the wind. Mara kept close to Eli, each step deliberate, her senses alert to every movement, every shadow. The stage road wound ahead, a thread of promise through the stark white landscape. She knew the journey would not be easy. She knew the cold and wind could still claim her. But she also knew that she was no longer alone, that the man beside her would not let anything take her from the life she was determined to claim. Night fell again, and the cabin behind them faded into the darkness. Mara's breath steamed in the frigid air, the satchel over her shoulder pressing into her shoulder with the weight of survival. Eli's presence was constant, a silent shield, his rifle never far, eyes sweeping the horizon for danger. Snow swirled around them, stinging exposed skin. Yet each step forward carried them closer to the stage road and the fragile safety it promised. The wind rose and fell like a living thing, testing endurance, demanding vigilance, but Mara met it with a determination that had been forged over countless nights of fear, exhaustion, and flight. As the faint light of dawn touched the horizon, the trail opened to reveal the stage road clearly. Mara's chest lifted with cautious relief. Ahead, smoke rose from a distant cabin, a sign of life, a sign that the world beyond her struggle held places of warmth and safety. Eli signaled her to stop, crouched beside her, scanning for any threat. She nodded, drawing strength from his calm, readying herself for the next leg of the journey. The snow glittered around them, painting the plains in ethereal white, and for the first time, Mara allowed herself to believe that the storm, the flight, and the danger had brought her not to the edge of despair, but to the threshold of something better. She stepped forward slowly, deliberately, feeling the crunch of snow beneath her boots and the weight of the satchel pressing against her. Eli moved beside her, steady, unwavering, a living shield against the plains and the past. The stage road lay ahead, winding, treacherous, yet clear. Mara's mind filled with possibilities, of warmth, of shelter, of choice, and maybe, in time, of a life she could call her own. They reached the edge of a small rise, looking down on the faint lights of a distant cabin. Mara felt hope blossom cautiously in her chest. She had survived storms, men, and endless plains. She had survived herself, and now she could move forward, step by painstaking step, into a future she had once believed impossible. Eli's hand rested briefly on her shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of her endurance, her courage, and the life she still held. She nodded to him, drawing strength from the presence of someone who had refused to let the world dictate her worth. Slowly, Mara followed the trail downward, toward the light, toward warmth, toward survival. The snow whispered around her. The plains stretched infinite and cold, yet inside a fragile flame of hope burned bright. She had endured the storm. She had survived the night, and she was no longer running. For the first time in years, Mara allowed herself to feel it fully, safety, belonging, and the possibility of a future she could shape with her own hands. Eli walked beside her, silent, vigilant, steady, a living reminder that some men could still honor a person's worth without taking it for themselves. Together they pressed on, leaving footprints in the snow that would freeze into silver under the morning sun, each one a testament to survival, courage, and hope reborn. The storm had passed. Mara had found a roof. Mara had found a future.